Oh yeah, sure.
I always like to think that everybody's body's different, so I could be taking the same medication as somebody else, and the effect that it might have on their body is going to be completely different to mine. Obviously, the way we metabolize things is different.
To a degree, yeah.
I've come across scans before where anti-anxiety medication or antidepressants have obviously had an effect on results and stuff like that. Party drugs, you name it, all sorts of things. Yeah.
So it comes down to how the substance, the drug, whatever it is, what effect it has on body water, effectively. And that usually comes down to either something like a diuretic effect. So you take like any diuretic, a Lasix or a mod diuretic or any other, even caffeine. So anything that contributes to an increased function of your kidneys and increased water function will modify your blood volume. Extracellular fluid, up or down, will impact whether you over or underestimate body fat and lean mass. It's as simple as that. So people who, but again, it doesn't matter. People who are chronic users of caffeine, me included, it doesn't matter that I'm smashing 20 cups of coffee a day, from this perspective anyway, because it's consistent. That's my template. So I'm comparing like with like. If I all of a sudden take on, I start taking caffeine supplementary or something, and I change that protocol, well then it might matter. But there's a whole bunch. Like caffeine's a good example because everyone's drinking caffeine. It's got a diuretic effect. The thing with caffeine that's kind of interesting and matters is that we do adapt to caffeine use very quickly. So habitual users of caffeine, after about 4 days, with as little as 3 cups a day, this is sort of a side fun fact, will not experience the diuretic effects that you would if you weren't a normal user. So, but again, they're habitual users, they're using it every day. When they scan, they're doing their thing, and it doesn't really matter. And that's sort of Lasix and the other sort of diuretic meds, because they're often used for blood pressure and things like that. Your bodybuilders, your comp physique competitors, they're maybe using diuretics, they're likely using anabolics. I mean, that's the world we live in. That gets into a conversation around nitrogen retention, and nitrogen retention matters again from a body fluid perspective. So nitrogen is part of the building blocks of muscle, really simply, and we want to be in a positive nitrogen balance so that we are in a position to have adequate nitrogen available for replenishment and development of muscle mass. But there's also a fluid component to that. So for example, being nitrogen depleted would be like being dehydrated, in really simple terms. So that flat muscle look and things like that. And that's often a lack of intracellular water within the muscle. Other ones, Creatine's the same, right? Creatine will store. It's pretty much like carbs. So with carbohydrates, people will store 2 to 3 grams of fluid with every gram of glycogen in the case of carbs, or creatine in the case of creatine monohydrate. So people again, it doesn't matter if they're just having the same carbs consistently, but if they go to a carb load protocol or they go and become keto, then anyone who's, you done keto?
I've tried keto, but I didn't enjoy it too much. I like my carbs. So.
No. See, the thing I got with keto, because I've tried it as well. The thing I got with keto, I felt flat as a tap. I couldn't get a pump in the gym.
Nothing.
Couldn't lift a thing, right? Well.
No glycogen.
No glycogen in my muscle, right? And no fluid.
Felt dead in the head too.
Well, I had that as well. But so, I mean, that supports what we would expect to see. And some people who do the keto will come through that, particularly with the haze, the mental sort of bit of fuzziness. I didn't really get a lot of that, but I certainly couldn't get a pump, and it didn't matter how long. I stuck with it for 3 months, and I just couldn't get through it, so I got rid of it because I felt.
I stuck with it for a month and just went, no thanks.
Well, normally you would expect to adapt within a month. But you'll see it on the scan, right? If someone goes, I'm going to go keto, then you'll see some shifts in their body water, and you'll see, absolutely. So you'll see, it will just by nature of that skew or overestimate their fat and underestimate their muscle.
And we see that occasionally.
Well, I actually saw that with one of our very first franchises who purchased their units out of Canada, and they were working with some professional ice hockey players. And I remember having emails, at the 4-week period saying, "Hey, mate, their water levels are still dropping, their body fat percentage is still going up. What's going on here?" I said, "Well, what sort of diet are they? Get ketosis?" And I said, "Just stick with it."
Yeah.
Around the 6-week mark, they got scanned again, and their water levels started pumping back up, and by the 8-week mark, they were 10% body fat on the machine, and their body finally switched adapt into a ketosis based
absolutely. And so other things like non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, your ibuprofens and things like that, they will tend to be more retentive, more like retain a little bit more sodium as well with that, and so it's pretty involved in terms of the renal function, but the principle's the same. It increases the blood volume, it'll modify what we see on the scan. Corticosteroids, so the anti-inflammatories of the world, same sort of scenario there. Into your stims, so anything that is stimulatory in nature, again probably caffeine, your beta-alanines, a few of those, into the social spectrum as well of amphetamines, I suppose, not that we, and we're not presenting a position on that, other than to say they will produce off a vasoconstrictive effect.
But even saying amphetamines and stuff like that, or if you look at certain things that people get prescribed to help lose weight, they essentially have the same effect that those types of drugs
no
do.
question, no question they do.
So Duromine?
Duromine, absolutely. So you'll see a vasoconstrictive effect. It tends to shift how blood is moved. So this is why skin temperature matters, right? So when, because you read in the books, it'll say, temperature conditions matter. They do matter. So there's been a fair bit of research on this. When people have an elevated core temperature, or if they're in a hot room, you know yourself, right? There's a shunting or a shifting of blood flow to the periphery. That's how your body cools down, right? It sends the blood just under the skin. And that's one of the mechanisms of cooling down, right? To take the heat internally via your blood to the periphery. Now, what that changes is the conductance effectively of the body. And you'll see you might see a 2 kilogram shift in what's reported as fat. Because the extracellular fluid goes up.
Straight for the roof.
So the scan will go, okay, well, that interprets it as fat. So that's why it matters. So that's why in most gyms it's going to be a consistent 10. But if you're in some gyms and they don't have air conditioning and it's the middle of summer and it's really hot and people are sweating versus the middle of winter and it's snowing outside, it'll matter. It'll fluctuate 1 or 2 kilos. So they're just little things. I mean, it's not going to be a 10% shift or a 10 kilo shift, but they'll be subtle. So when you've got people who, are really, you'll have some clients who are, watching every single gram.
For sure.
They'll go, hang on, I've just put on a kilo, bugger. It's not necessarily that. It's the fact that it's 20 degrees hotter in here than it was, I don't know the Fahrenheit versus the Celsius, but a 5 to 10 degrees Celsius shift makes a difference. So that's another one.
Thank you so much for listening. Thanks, Dr. Chris, and thanks, Pete, for your expertise today. If you need any more information or you would like to ask a few more questions, please feel free to contact us via our website or all the social channels. And thank you once again.